2, 3.
Good morning. I'm John Arneil, the Director of UniSearch here at UNSW. We're the largest and longest established provider of expert opinion services. This is our 60th year of engaging with the legal profession, and our team interacts daily with our legal clients that are working in stressful litigation matters. The pressure is quite apparent, and the high incidence of mental health issues in the profession is well documented, particularly among young lawyers. On this note, we'd like to thank you for participating in today's webinar, which has been created specifically to provide the profession a forum to help acknowledge, manage and address stresses more effectively. We hope this initiative will help start conversations and contribute to a greater movement of mental health awareness in your workplace. To get the proceedings underway shortly, we have with us the esteemed former barrister and legal academic Anne Richards from the Black Dog Institute with us today, who will facilitate today's session. Throughout the webinar, Anne will be asking some poll questions that we invite you to actively participate in anonymously. Before I hand over to Anne, I would like to acknowledge country. This presentation is being delivered from UNSW Kensington, and I would like to show and respect and acknowledge the Bedigal people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I also extend my respect to the elders of all the communities where our webinar participants are located today. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, John. Moving chairs. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're awake. I'm barely awake, 8 o'clock in the morning. I guess you've already been in your office and already done an hour's work by now. I hope not, but you might have done. So I'm Anne Richards. I'm from the Black Dog Institute. Don't work there all the time, but I do this because as a former lawyer particularly, I'm passionately committed to this whole question of mental health, not just in our profession, but generally. In a funny kind of way, this feels like I've come full circle because, as John said, I started my life off as a legal academic and a barrister. I'm not sure where the esteemed came from. That's really cool though. But it's kind of like full circle to be now sitting back in a university and talking to you all. I really also want to make the point that although I started my life as a legal academic and as a barrister, I've gone on to have a huge number of roles, and they've included things like in-house counsel for the Australian Medical Association. I started judicial education in this country. I was also human resources director for a very large law firm and also for Rothschild. And the reason I'm telling you this is because you should know up front, because you're going to see me in a video anyway, that I've done that whilst I've lived with depression and with anxiety. And the whole point about that is that I sit here as somebody who is basically fully functioning most of the time, and even though sometimes stress and anxiety and depression feels like it's got the better of us, it's actually not really any different, and that's my point. It's not really any different to having some sort of physical illness or concern, and that's the point that which we're trying to get to with this whole education and awareness piece around mental health. But let me just start with some housekeeping things. You're going to be muted during this presentation, but that doesn't mean to say you won't participate. If you've got some questions and I'm not covering them, or as they occur to you, type them in the box and we'll have a look if we've got some time at the end. I'll also be conducting some polls, as John said, and I'll give you an opportunity to participate in that way too. I may ask you some questions, and I just want to see you raise your hand in answer to those, and that will be helpful. And at the end of this presentation, the recording and a couple of handouts that I'll refer to will be sent out to you. So, please focus with me on what we're talking about, because I was working with an organisation yesterday and their motto was "Get it done." And I know that in law firms, that's a great deal of pressure on us to get things done and get things done at a really fast time. The thing about mental health, and those of you who are experiencing it or know other people who are, you can't just get it done. You actually have to spend some time on it. So close off the other distractions, stay with me for this hour, and let's see what we can come up with by the end. It's coming from, I work with Black Dog from time to time, and that's simply because I, being a lawyer myself, was looking for an organisation that I thought had the best evidence in the area. And Black Dog, without question, has got evidence. It's the best evidence-based research organisation, mental health organisation in Australia, as far as I'm concerned. I have enormous respect for it because it has a full circle kind of approach. It has research, it has clinics, it does education for people like yourselves in workplaces, and also for the medical profession, and it also gives back to the community with presentations that way. So feel assured and reassured that what I'm talking to you about today is, in fact, as far as I am aware, some of the best evidence that there is. But let me ask you this. Raise your hand by using the button on your screen. Raise your hand if you know somebody who is experiencing a mental health condition. And by that, let's just restrict it to anxiety, depression, bipolar. Anything more serious than that, probably people aren't in the workplace. They're getting treatment, at least for some of the time. But people do come to work with anxiety, with depression, with bipolar disorder, and are fully functioning most of the time. So just raise your hand and let me see how many of you know someone, and it could be yourself, how many of you know someone who's actually living with experiencing a mood disorder? I'm just going to look at the screen and see how many hands go up. Oh, my goodness me, that's virtually everybody online. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I would be surprised to see anything else. Let me ask you a follow-up question. How many of you would be comfortable talking about something that you saw going on for somebody else? How many of you would feel comfortable having that discussion with them about what they might be experiencing? Show me again by raising your hands. Yeah, not so many, and that's absolutely consistent with the research. And how many of you would feel comfortable raising it yourself about yourself? Let's have another show of hands. Yeah. And so the numbers drop again. And that's absolutely consistent, and that's why we're here. So I guess what we're trying to do now is say, well, why is that so? Why is it that people, everybody knows somebody who's got a mood disorder, everybody knows, well, and not surprisingly, I mean, the general population, I'll come to lawyers in a second, but in the general population, 1 in 5 of us at any one time are experiencing some form of mood disorder. That's 20%. So if you think about the people in your team, you think about the people in your law firm, 1 in 5, 20% of your team at any particular time in your particular area, amongst the partnership, they're not excluded, everybody is experiencing a mood disorder, and yet only a small proportion of you said that you'd be able to have a conversation with them, and even smaller proportion of you said that you would raise that with somebody else about yourself. Why is that when it's so prevalent? That's in the general population. Your numbers I'll come to in a second, and let's just do that straight away. In the numbers that we know of in the law firm, and recognise that there are lots of organisations doing lots of research on this, so you get numbers that are variable, but I think you'll understand and get the general gist. This was some research that was done recently. It says 2009. There are more recent numbers coming up, but I don't think the numbers have gone down. I think they're going up. And essentially, if you have a look at that slide that we're looking at there, from the Brain in Mind Institute, you can see that if the general population have 62% saying that they have low or no psychological distress, that's much less amongst solicitors and barristers. And if you drop down to the very high distress, at the very bottom of that slide, the general population, 3.8%, whereas solicitors say almost 9%. And that's our understanding at the moment, that about 33% of solicitors are experiencing some form of extreme anxiety and depression, massive stress, of course. Barristers, not quite such a high number, but certainly a high number, and judges and associates, still higher, much higher than the general population. And law students as well, they're even higher again, around 50%. So something's going on here. We need to do something. How can we break down some of this stigma? How can we get past the fear of talking about it in our firms? Because there is absolutely no doubt, and I know for somebody who's been there, there's absolutely no doubt that if you have a conversation with it about it, you can start actually getting some assistance. You might even be able to protect yourself. You might even be able to put in place some preventative measures. The biggest challenge, I think, is what are we looking at? And a lot of people get confused about the difference between depression and anxiety and stress. That's where we're going to go. So today, in this time that we have with it, very high level, a look at depression, a look at anxiety, a look at stress and how they differ, and then talk about the need to talk about it, and then just a couple of tips on how you can build your resilience should this happen to you. We can't always avoid this. There are so many factors that contribute to a mood disorder, mental health, just like cancer. We can't necessarily avoid it. We can't necessarily avoid getting cardiac situations. We can't necessarily avoid getting diabetes, living with all of those things. But we can learn to live with them, and there are some preventative and protective factors that we can actually put in place that might help us ameliorate the effect. So let's start with knowing, first of all, a little bit about when there's a problem. I'm going to show you a video now, and it's 4 people talking about what it looks like to live with depression in the workplace, how it feels, what it seems like. What I'm going to encourage you to do is, as you watch this video, think about what signs or signals or symptoms are you seeing that indicate that somebody might be in a very depressed place or in a very black mood, certainly in a place that you want to raise the topic with them, or even you might be feeling it yourself. After we've looked at the video, I'm going to run a poll, and in that poll I'm going to ask you to identify some of the symptoms and signals that you've seen, and then we'll have a little discussion about it. So let's go with the video.
I would be upset on the way home and to work. I wouldn't sleep because I was worried about what was going to happen at work the next day. At lunchtime, I would leave the office and go and stand in Hyde Park, and I'd cry. So whilst I was at work, I put on this facade of humour, but as soon as I had the opportunity to be by myself, I would go out and I'd be overcome by emotion. Some people knew, and they were quite supportive, but generally I hid it from everybody at work. I was disengaged, I was almost looking to get out of work. I was not wanting to be there at all, leaving as soon as I could, getting there as late as possible.
I started to feel really miserable, and this was a complete shift in my behaviour. And from being really excited and optimistic and thrilled and creative and always coming up with new ideas and bouncing back and resilient to any of the pushback that I got from the organisation, I found myself not caring. In fact, I found myself demotivated, I found myself bored, I found myself not wanting to get up to work. And this went on for about a period of 3 months, and in the end I just said, you know what, I don't think this job is for me anymore, and so I resigned.
I think it'd probably start with the isolating from colleagues, and then because you start isolating, you start feeling isolated, and then because you're depressed and you're just thinking negatively and perceiving everything negatively, you start perceiving, well, I would start perceiving it as they were excluding me. So, and then to them, it probably would just seem like I didn't want to talk to them. So it really creates this huge barrier between you and colleagues. So that takes away that chance to get support, because you just start drifting further away from everybody. And I would find that just cognitively, my concentration would be terrible, my memory would be terrible. So it would impact my actual work ability, because I just wouldn't be able to do things in a structured way, or I'd forget things. And then, you know, anytime anyone, say any manager, would sort of go, okay, so what's the deal with that? I'd take it as a criticism, and it would just be, you know, add to that sense of incompetence and isolation.
Well, my first work was probably as a professional footballer for Balmain, and then I knew that there was something wrong. I was always lethargic, never got the thrill out of it as I should, found myself crying before games, but at that time I just didn't understand what it was. As well, during that time I went to Teachers College and became a teacher. I eventually got through and started teaching, but I was so exhausted all the time and couldn't concentrate that I felt that I wasn't doing the right thing by the students. So I quit teaching, because I just always felt after every day that I really hadn't done the right thing and given them the best that they deserved.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it? That four people can describe their experience of being in the workplace like that. The extraordinary thing about Wayne at the end, and you would have picked this up, was that he was a professional footballer. He played for Balmain, which subsequently became West. Some people said very nastily the other day that it might be just, that's why he cried before games, because he knew he was playing for West. But that's not the case, of course. It was his depression. But interestingly, he didn't cry after games, and you'd realise that the difference was that he'd run around the football pitch for 90 minutes and the exercise just changed, you know, his brain chemistry for a while. It's just lots of evidence around the value of exercise. But let me ask you that question that I wanted to ask you. Let me put up a poll here. I asked you to think about the signs and the symptoms that you might have seen during that video. Why don't you click on as many of those that you think you saw, and then we'll have a look and see which ones are indications of depression. Go for the poll now. Okay, that's probably enough time. Let's have a look at the results. Wow, look at that. Look at that. Every one of you saw that, and you could see where the thing that stuck out most for you was the withdrawal and the isolation. But every one of you saw those things. Let's close that poll off now and just talk about that. Yeah, the interesting thing is that with depression, the kinds of symptoms we're going to see are that sustained state of sadness. You can see it up on your screens now. That sense of low self-esteem. Nairi talked about, you know, the fact that she didn't think it was good enough. And I certainly know that when I was in that place one time when I was at work, for someone who had much confidence and, you know, a lot of responsibility, you'd be plagued by self-doubt. I don't know if other people relate to that, but it's kind of like the imposter syndrome is just writ large. That feeling of being very low and numb, and you you may not be able to see these in other people, you can see it in yourself, but you might be if you know what their usual behaviour is, because that's what we're looking for in order to have a conversation with somebody else. What's out of character? They don't have so much enjoyment in life. I mean, I'm a scuba diver and I absolutely love my scuba diving, but there was one occasion when I went off diving, and even getting below the water, looking at the most amazing creatures, it didn't bring me any joy. There was clearly something going on way beyond my control. And I know there are still some people who think you can just snap out of it, put a deadline on it, pull your socks up. I've heard some horrific phrases around as if we've got a choice to be in this place. Nobody chooses mental ill health, nobody. It's the last thing in this world that you'd want to choose. So, but people who don't understand and are fearful of it will say things like that. Your sex drive might talk, that negative self-talk, that doubt, always being negative about things, very low energy levels. I'm somebody who's got lots of energy most of the time, but people who are experiencing depression, it's hard to get out of bed, it really is. And you heard some of the people talking about that on the video. I mean, you just don't, it's exhausting. I don't think people realise how absolutely exhausting it is unless you've been there yourself. And if it's exhausting, imagine how that translates into the workplace. You know that. People are tired and lethargic, they can't concentrate, their memory's gone. You'll find that they can't control their emotions. Peter talked about crying. For me, I would get very edgy, and that's still the way I get, very snappy, even though I'm in a very dark place, and you get anxiety, and there can be changes in your appetite and weight. So it's a very dark place. It's kind of like there are no feelings whatsoever. So what you would see in people around you would be people who would normally have some level of commitment, engagement, enthusiasm, talking with the team. Suddenly there's nothing there. They're in a different place. It's a very black place. And you know, everybody gets down. We know everybody gets down. It's part of life, but this is a more sustained thing, and it's out of character. That's what we're looking for when we're trying to look for, is there something happening to me that I need to get some help about? Is there somebody I'm watching, seeing, a member of my team that maybe I should have a conversation with? Clinically, what we say is if you've got more than 5 of these symptoms and they last for 2 weeks or more, and they're interfering with your life, both at home and at work, then it's time to actually seek some help. So, depression, starting point, lower percentage of the population experiencing depression, but it's worth knowing so we can compare it with the next thing we're going to look at, anxiety, that it's a place of numbness, nothingness, dark, black. That's in contrast to anxiety, and I know that the anxiety numbers in the general population, and particularly amongst lawyers, is on the increase. And amongst young kids, those of you who've got young kids, you'll be really conscious of this. You're seeing the numbers go up. 1 in 7 of kids between the age of 4 and 17. There's horrendous numbers now. And we need to be thinking about, well, what can we do? How do we role model getting help, talking to people, because our little kids are watching that as well. So there's something else besides looking after ourselves, looking after our colleagues. There's also what can we do for our families. Let me show you this video. It's a very different video from the other one. This one is about anxiety. It is by Beyond Blue, and it is designed to sort of try and get inside what it feels like actually to be there, to experience anxiety. So if you feel slightly anxious watching it, that's okay, that's what it's meant to do, but you're perfectly safe. It's a video. We'll do the same thing afterwards. We'll have a poll. What symptoms did you notice? What signs? What signals?
been expecting you. What? Don't tell me you don't recognise me. Oh, still don't know who I am. Let me try and help you with that. I'm the ill ease that you feel when you walk into a crowded room. You know, the hot and cold flushes that confuse you when you're already confused enough. I am the one that raises the whip to your already racing heart. I am the tightening of your chest, the snowballing worries that feel like they might become an avalanche and can just bury you in an instant. My friend, I am the obsessive and I'm the compulsive. I'm the voice, you know the one. It's always questioning everything you do, everything you think. And I am every single staring eye that watches you. And every one of those places that you try so desperately to avoid. So, now that we have become acquainted, what are you going to do about it?
Very different to depression. Very different to depression. If depression was the absence of feeling, that feeling of numb and black and empty, I'm sure you saw something quite different when you watched that video. I hope everyone's okay after watching it. Let's run a little poll and see what you did do. So again, what signals, signs, symptoms did you notice? Okay, so just waiting for the results to come up so I can see. Yeah, again, the interesting thing, you saw all the things that we saw, that we see in anxiety, but notice when you look at those results, notice how physical anxiety is. That's what you picked up there, the heart racing, the tightening of the chest, and I'm sure that you would experience that. It's kind of like the fight-flight mechanism is on full time. It doesn't switch off, which is exactly what it is. The interesting thing about being in a law firm with the pressures that you're under, where everything is so time controlled, time restricted, is that it's almost like this, people expect you to be able to cope with this. And sure, we have to be able to cope with a great deal of stress. I reckon it should be in everybody's job description. I think, you know, it probably should be a mandatory part of every role that there is in a law firm, at bar, being a judge, anywhere else in the world, actually. I think we should talk about how stress is just part of this. But when we're talking anxiety in the way that I'm talking about it now, I'm talking about it when it is a clinical condition, when it's much more than stress. I'm going to come to stress in a minute, but it's much more than that. It's kind of like non-stop. It's pervasive. It gets in the way of absolutely everything that you do. And as we know, everybody gets anxious from time to time. That's what we're wired for. Our fight-flight mechanism is there to enable us to survive. So we're used to feeling anxious. It could be from, well, we don't have to worry about the World Cup anymore, do we? Because the Wallabies bowed out of that last weekend. But we can be, upset, concerned about whether we can afford the house that we want, what's happening with what's going on at home, what's happening in the firm, did I do the right thing by the client, what's the team doing, what's happening at the partnership level, I can hear gossip going on, I don't know what's going on, just generally what legislation might come in. We're living in a world of AI and digital stuff now, what's going to happen in the firm with that as we go down this new tech road. There are so many things that are constantly making us anxious. The challenge with when it becomes a clinical disorder is that it's much longer term. Because anxiety is part of our natural day-to-day lives, it's harder to diagnose as a clinical condition. And so what the medical profession are looking for, what your doctors are looking for in order to diagnose you with generalized anxiety disorder, are some symptoms and signs that last for up to 6 months. Sometimes, of course, it'll get diagnosed a lot sooner than that. But there are the symptoms that we're talking about, the kind of thoughts that you might have. So you just can't focus. You're constantly worrying about stuff. I mean, in its extreme, we see obsessive compulsive behaviour. We see phobias. That sort of anxiety at its extreme, where you're totally consumed and obsessed by whatever you're fearful of. And doctors are looking for that, but it doesn't have to be that high level, that sort of extreme, for it to be part of a problem for you. Your body, what's happening with your body? If depression still makes you exhausted because it's tired, it's tiring and it's black just hanging in there, and you don't get sleep. Similarly with anxiety, the amount of body tension and the symptoms that you're going through constantly, that is absolutely exhausting. So no doubt your sleep is disturbed. If I'm experiencing anxiety, my head hits the pillow and I think, oh my goodness, I'm going to get some rest out of this now. But it's like a switch goes on. I don't know if anyone else relates to that, but it's kind of like the pillow says, gotcha. And then all these thoughts just keep rumbling around, and you wake up multiple times in the night. And you constantly, with the body stuff, you could have difficulty breathing. You need to go for lots of massages because you're always so tense. And your heart's racing. And what sorts of behaviours does that mean at work? Well, pretty obviously, it means that it's very hard to focus. And in law firms, when you're under such pressure in your jobs and you're being asked to focus 100% on a project, on a client, on a matter that has to be dealt with immediately, but you're worried about something. It can be definable, it can be indefinable, but all these doubts, all these fears, everything is happening to you, which clouds your judgment and it clouds your decision-making process. And what ends up happening is, in fact, you will either avoid it, or you procrastinate, or you just withdraw. And that's what anxiety can look like. It's often far more recognisable than depression, but both, if they're out of character from what you experience and how you usually are at work, or how you see other people at work, or your friends or your family at home, that's when we need to start taking notice. So we need to be clear about what's usual behaviour for someone, which means taking the time usually to know them. But you often in a law firm, you're working alongside, building some relationships, because people aren't going to spill their guts to you and say, hey, I'm having a problem, if they don't trust you and if there isn't a relationship. And so, we're talking about mental health here. I think actually being able to deal with mental health issues, we need to take a big step back as well. And so in my work, I run a company now which is all about leadership development, and the bottom line is you have to, as a leader and as a colleague, develop relationships with each other so that you can have these very, very intense and often deeply personal conversations about what's going on up here. We can't see it, And that's what confuses people and frightens people. You can see a broken arm, you can see someone's got the flu, but you can't see what's going on in your mind, and that can be scary. You need to trust someone and have a good relationship with them in order to be able to talk about it with them. Let's just move on and just clarify the difference between anxiety and stress. Stress is normal. I know it's normal in your jobs, it's normal in my job too. But it can be really positive. I'm one of those people who loves deadlines. It's kind of a bit bizarre really, but I actually do. I can usually always get to my deadlines. Some people are a bit more measured than that and do a lot of preparation beforehand. But it can be very positive. It can lift you to levels that you can perform that you never thought that you could before. It can work really, really well. Challenge is when it's prolonged. Stress is, of course, your fight-flight signature, and it's a sense that, if you like, I'm in overwhelm, I feel like I'm drowning. It's when it's in this damaging place, this I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, I just can't see an end in sight, I can't see, as they say, the light at the end of the tunnel. The most important thing you can do to actually deal with stress is to recognise your own body, your own stress signature. I call it a stress signature. What does your body do? Your body will actually tell you, whether it be racing heart, whether it be flushing, whether it be tensing, whether it be tapping your knee. Somebody told me the other day that they actually had a twitch in their left arm, which was really, it's just their sign. But what does your body tell you about 0.2 of a second before there is an awareness that you are experiencing a great deal of stress and need to do something about it? Because you do need to do something about it. Because if you're feeling stressed, if you are stressed, what are you going to be feeling? You're going to be feeling, again, irritable. You're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel like you're in a deep, dark hole. You're going to feel like maybe even feel like, God, I don't even know if I want to be a lawyer anymore. And that's natural, but it's not. It's the stress and it's the mental condition talking. It's not actually necessarily the job, but it is a signal to you that you should think about, what can I do to be able to take some steps around it? Because your thinking is muddled at this point when you're under stress as well. Your decision making may be difficult. You may make hasty decisions when you really want to do something else, and you'll be incredibly sensitive to criticism. So these are the kinds of behaviours that we'll see as well, and people will withdraw, be snappy. Stress when you see it. So if we have talked about depression as being very black, and we've talked about anxiety as being absolutely full on, exhaustingly full on, the difference to know whether it's stress or anxiety is this: if you can remove the stressor and feel okay, then it was stress and not anxiety. And what do I mean by that? So, for example, for most people, if they're experiencing stress, just going away for a weekend or for a holiday, after the first day or two, when your body adjusts and comes back to normal, then whatever your normal is, then we know it was stress. And it could be a relationship, it could be a living environment, it could be the people that you keep company with, it could be some of the things that you do on weekends. But if they all cause you stress, and if you change and move away from the stressor and then you feel okay, then it was stress and not anxiety. Can be a blurry line. If you go to the Black Dog website, which is blackdog.org.au, there are some self-tests on there that you can do for depression, anxiety and bipolar. And I find those quite a useful starting point for people who are questioning whether or not, is there something wrong with me? Because sometimes we're either in denial, or we think it's a sign of failure, or that we're weak, or people will judge us. None of the above. Well, some of those things may actually be true amongst people who are not educated in this field and not aware of it and not empathetic. But the bottom line is you're not making this up. And if you go and do a self-test, you can see at the end of it, it's not a diagnosis, but the website will say something like, you know, you ought to go and see a doctor or get some assistance, and you'll know you're not fantasizing around this. This is real, and we've talked about the population, number of the people in the population, and particularly lawyers who are experiencing this stuff. So you are not alone, but what people are not doing is going and getting help. And that, of course, just exacerbates the problem, and it can really derail your career. I walked away, as you heard me say in the video, I walked away from a job that I absolutely loved. I blamed the organisation, I blamed the role. So I know that lots of lawyers walk away thinking it's all to do with the law, and it might be, but it might not be too. It might be your disease, chronic illness, condition talking. It's not you. The same way as cancer's not you, bronchitis is not you, asthma is not you, diabetes is not you. It's a condition that you're living with. So don't be afraid to confront what you might be experiencing or what you're seeing in others. There is help available. And one of the reasons I do this, and I do this so I hope that you can see with such conviction and passion, is because I honestly know that from the moment I started to get help, my life changed. And I just struggled through, but not very well. I walked away from a job that I loved because I was experiencing great depression and anxiety at the time. I don't want other people to do that. I want you to have the job that you love. But I recognise that, and we all recognise that with that comes some challenges. Sometimes they're medical conditions that we just have, not by choice. Sometimes it's stress that we can do something about. If we know our stress signature, we know it's time to take a break. And I'm going to come to just the little things that you can do in a minute that will help you on that. So now that we know the difference between depression, anxiety and stress, what can we do about it? And this is, I guess, what you want to know. It's really not rocket science. It truly isn't. It's very, I hate to say simple, but it's not simplistic. It can be quite daunting, but let me give you a few steps here which are not hard to take if you can find the courage and the time, and make the time to do it. To prove the point on that, just look at this little video about what happens if you do talk about it in the workplace, what happens to how people treat you, and what kind of benefits can come from actually disclosing.
I've learned from my experience of depression in the workplace lots of things. I suppose the biggest thing that I learned was that people do care, that there are systems in place to help, and if they're not helping, find someone within your organisation that does help. And there's alternatives outside your workplace if you're not comfortable dealing with it inside. By talking about things and saying you're not coping, by talking about things and saying you need help, that's how you get help. And people cut you a bit of slack, which makes it easier. Since I've been talking about having suffered from depression, I've had lots of people come up to me and say, I've never told anyone, but I suffer from depression too. And to get that conversation started in the workplace is an incredibly empowering thing.
I really do believe that if somebody had said to me, how are you going? I've noticed a change. Things are not the way they used to be. Do you want to tell me if that's my perception or is it what you're feeling? And even if I hadn't wanted to talk then, if somebody had said, look, you know, I'm going to check in with you in a week or two's time, because this isn't you, Anne. This isn't the Anne that we know. If somebody had said that, and then I think also added that additional step, why don't you just go and talk to a doctor? I think it would have made the world of difference. I truly do. And I really do. If people had said to me that I should go and see a doctor, that would have made the world of difference. My suggestion to you is that you should go and see a doctor. You should book in for a long consultation, not a short consultation. Try and take someone with you. They're the most beneficial things that you can absolutely do. That's your first step. Some of you will also have an employee assistance provider in your workplace. Go see them too. That's another option. Pick up the phone. It's an option to a GP. It's not a crisis line, but you can also see that particular, it's a GP that's there, that's available to you. And the third step, so going to see a doctor is a first step. Second step is actually contacting your EAP if you can. The third step would be to actually talk to colleagues and friends about either what you might be experiencing or what you are seeing others experiencing. Now that's hard. If you do it yourself, you've got to find someone that you trust, and we've touched on that before. But if you want to raise it with somebody else, and it could be the greatest act of kindness that you'll ever do and the greatest act of caring, and if you're a manager or a leader of a team, then it's probably up to you to do that, because not only do you have if they'll let you talk to them, and if they want to talk to it, it will have an enormous impact on that person, but also on the whole team and on the whole firm. My suggestion to you, and I use this language because I'm a lawyer, my suggestion is that you don't go just up to somebody and say, how are you going? You know, you don't seem yourself. That's very easy for people to say, I'm fine, it's got nothing to do with you. You may be concerned that you're invading their privacy, they don't want to talk to you about it anyway, and all of that might be true. It's very different if you have a conversation which says, hey, Anne, can we have a conversation? Can we have I'm really concerned. Can we just, take 5 minutes, 10 minutes and make sure you can give the time? It's not billable time, I know, and that's part of the challenge in a law firm where everything is accounted for. Mental health takes time. So it's around finding that time to say, hey Anne, I've noticed you don't seem to be yourself recently. I'm used to you always coming in early and always going home late. Not necessarily that those are good things, but that's your pattern of behaviour. And over the last couple of weeks, or a little longer, that's not happening. You seem to be coming in really late, you're getting away as soon as you can. Some of your matters aren't getting dealt with in the way that you used to be able to just shoot them out the door. What's going on? Is there something that you'd like to share with me? I'm really concerned. How can I help? What's going on? That's an evidence-based approach. And for me, if you approach someone with evidence or observed behavioural changes, is the way I think that it's talked about by others, it's very hard for people to say, oh, I'm fine. They'll still say it, and it may well be that they absolutely don't want to talk to you, and that's their right. But if you say something after that around, well, I know it's quite clear, it's clear to me at the moment, and I understand and I respect the right that you don't want to talk about it at this particular moment, but actually I really do care, and I think that there are some things that you can do. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check in with you in however many days' time, and I'll see how you're going. And most importantly, what you have to do then is check in. I for integrity. Do what you say you're going to do. Because if you don't, then believe me, that person actually will be expecting you to check in. And when you check in, how you going? Feeling any differently? I'm still seeing the kinds of things I was seeing before. You seem to be trying to cope a little better, but it's not sort of 100%. I'm sure there's something we could do for you. Try again. And I would say don't give up. There'll be a point at which you know that somebody just absolutely doesn't want to help, in which case you can say it doesn't want help, in which case you would say, look, you don't want to talk to me, I understand that, but I am concerned, I really do think you should go and see a doctor. But very often, if you've got a good relationship with someone and you can put some evidence out there, not in the way that we do as lawyers, but caring, kind, empathetic evidence about just what we're seeing seeing that's out of character for that person, very often they will find the time, and it's often accompanied with a great sense of relief that someone's noticed and that they can have a chat about it. So I encourage you to think about that, but plan. In the same way as we plan for everything, please plan to have that conversation with someone. Think about what you're going to say and what you've seen. So the third step, and this is where we'll sort of begin to wrap up this this short webinar as an introduction to mental health. The third step is sometimes, you know, you can't avoid this stuff. It's going to happen to you, but there are some things that you can do, some simple steps that you can take towards being well. And this is based on some phenomenal research, and the handouts that will come out to you along with the recording will show you where this research comes from. Whole review of all of the literature in the field by 400 amazing people in the UK, and their job was to reduce it down to what are 5 ways in which we can build up our resilience, build our well-being, so that if this stuff comes along, we're in a better place to bounce back from it, cope with it. It may even be preventative. And so what they are, the 5 steps are, first of all, connect. What that means is we are wired for social connection. Those of you who have studied a little neuroscience and know enough to know just from living life that we are wired not to be alone. Loneliness is a huge issue in our society at the moment, and it's because it's contrary to brain science. We are wired to connect. How many of you have got someone on your I really must call list? I really must have a cup of coffee with them list. Do it. It's good for your brain health. It's good for theirs. People treat, if you recall earlier in the videos, one of the major problems was when people were mentally unwell, that there was that sense of isolation, that sense of withdrawal. In other words, people just kept to themselves, and that just becomes an ever-decreasing spiral because we need human connection. We don't talk about talking therapies for no reason. Talking to people, or even an app, using an app on your social media, not a great and only way to go, but a start in terms of getting assistance for mental health. It's because we're connecting. In this area, we can't do this alone. We can't fix this on our own. And I suspect as lawyers, we always think we should be able to fix stuff. You're paid to fix stuff. You are paid as lawyers to come up with solutions, come up with outcomes, come up with, you know, a resolution that works for the party that you're representing. With mental health, it doesn't work like that. With mental health, we have to find out what the other person thinks they can do for themselves, because only they can take responsibility for fixing the way their brain is at that time, along with assistance from qualified people like the medical profession. So let's talk to people, let's connect. Secondly, be active. For some of you watching, I know that you're already on the exercise trail. We heard Wayne in the video earlier. Exercise was one of the ways that, as a footballer, he managed his behaviour, his mood disorders. I do a lot of walking. I go on lots of solo hikes through Japan. I love trekking and on the old pilgrimages there. I scuba dive, and if I'm, as my husband is contracted, we have a social contract. He's contracted to say if I'm not picking up the signs that I might be getting really anxious or a bit low, he'll say, "Oh, you're a bit edgy. Let's go for a walk." That's what I do. Simple mantra: if there's an escalator and there's stairs, just take the stairs. It doesn't have to be specific exercise. It could be incidental exercise, but move. The more you move, it's good for your body, it's good for your brain, new neurons, fresh neurons, energy. The evidence is compelling on the role of exercise as a way of dealing with mental health challenges. So please make sure it's a priority in your life. Take notice. Take time just to give yourself a break. This sounds really, again, hard to do in a law firm where everything is measured by the clock and there is no time for just taking time out for yourself. It's so structured, I know that. But you know, you can give your brain a 15-second break, and even a 15-second break will just give you energy. And what do I mean by that? I mean, just close out the noise. Some of you will know this as mindfulness, but you know, we don't even have to go down that track. There are wonderful mindfulness apps that you can get if you're interested in it, and I'd encourage you to. But just simply switching off the noise for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, where it all feels like it's crowding in, but just doing it all the time so your brain gets used to a bit of a rest. You can do that. So for example, when you go and get yourself a cup of coffee, actually, if you go downstairs and get yourself a decent latte or something, or whatever you drink, feel the coffee, feel the cup. Just instead of just grabbing it and start drinking it, actually take notice of what does the cardboard feel like. Have a look at the patterns. Some of them have really got lovely patterns on them now as opposed to plain ones. Have a look at the lid, have a look at the top. These seem so simple, but in that time, your brain can't focus on more than one thing at once. I know some people think they can, but it can't. It only can focus on one thing at once. And so if you're actually taking notice of the coffee cup or under the shower, how many drops are dropping on your shoulders, that'll keep you occupied for a while. Whereas what we're normally doing in the shower is thinking about the day ahead. When we're traveling on the train or in the car, look for something that you've never seen before. Find one thing that you can, oh my God, I've never seen that handrail there before, and I've walked this path, you know, lots and lots of times. Take notice to give your brain a break. Just close off the noise. Explore the mindfulness apps that are out there, Smiling Mind, Buddhify, lots of Calm, all sorts of things. And keep learning. I know that in law we are learning all the time. We have to. That's our job. That's the whole essence of what we do. But why not try learning something entirely different? Why not, for example, I'm trying to plan a trip into Scandinavia at the moment, and I'm having to learn, not because I'm going to Scandinavia, but it's the names. Those of you who've got a Scandinavian background, wow, I don't know how you manage it. The language is so foreign to me that my brain is struggling just to try and get my head around the names so I can work out destinations. But you could be doing cooking, you could be a language, it could be something entirely different, learning a musical instrument, it could be learning a dance, it could be studying, going for certain kinds of movies, don't care what it is, but just give your brain a break by encouraging fresh neurons, by learning something else. And finally, give. Give means giving of your time more than anything else. I know we give money, lawyers are great at philanthropy, but this means much more than that. It means giving people the time, like when you arrive at work, to say hello to people and how you're going and wait for the answer. I am actually just, even in the last few days, I've been stunned by walking into organisations where people just barely say hello, and then I'm immediately ushered into a room to do something where that rapport, that moment of human connection is missing. How can you build relationships if you don't give time? And the way you give thanks as well to someone, be specific. Don't just say thank you, but be specific. Thanks for really being here. Thanks for getting that project done. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to do that. It can make the world of difference. Just thinking about it yourself. How does it feel when someone is specific as opposed to, oh, thanks for doing that? Let's see, what are you going to do more of? Last poll and the end of the webinar. This poll, what are you going to do more of now on the basis of the 5 steps that we've just talked about? Are you going to do more connection, more activity, taking notice, keeping learning, giving? Which one of those will you commit to doing some more of this week? Let's go for that. Okay, oh, more activity, fantastic. Taking notice, excellent. Whatever it is that you've completed, great, just do it. Don't try and do all of them at once, but certainly the activity. I hope that you've found something out today that you didn't know before about this. I know we're right out of time on this, but hopefully you've answered a lot of your questions on the way through. Can't see any additional questions anyway. Today, hopefully what we've been able to do from Black Dog is to help you understand what mental health is about a little bit more, encourage you to talk about it some more, and giving you some steps for building resilience. Thank you so much for being here.